Welcome to the Guilford Selectboard meeting of May 27th, 2020. As chair of the Guilford Selectboard, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott as a result of COVID-19 pandemic and pursuant to Addendum 6 to Executive Order 01-20 and Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone and video, with additional access offered through telephone and video. We are using, and this platform is called meet.google for this remote meeting. All members of the Select Board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if desired, participate in this meeting by going to the URL meet.google.com/MJE-CDSU.VWJ or by telephoning 617-675-4444 and using the PIN number 157-087-779-4170 hashtag. B, providing public notice of instructions for accessing the meeting. Can someone put on mute because we're getting a lot of feedback? That's great. Providing public notice of instructions for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing this meeting, including how to access the meeting using meet.google.com/MJE-CDSU-VWJ or telephoning 617-675-4444 using the PIN number 157-087-779-4170 #. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem, please telephone 802-254-4117. And D, continuing the meeting if necessary. In the event the public is unable to access this meeting, it will be continued to a time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. So let's get our meeting started. Nice to see you all, Select Board, and I'd like to recognize the public, of course, and the rules of procedure are available if you wish, and those rules govern how the public and the Select Board interact with each other in regard to asking questions and answering questions. I would ask, are there any additions to our agenda this evening? Okay. Are there changes to the agenda order?
Not for me.
Okay. I do understand, though, that we wanted to remove an item from the agenda. Is that possible, Peter?
Yes, it is. If you do it during the changes to the agenda order section, you are more than welcome to remove them.
Well, I understand that Miranda did not meet, and so we want to strike that mutual aid report meeting from the agenda.
Okay.
Very good. I would ask for I'm sure that you've all read the minutes of the previous meeting, and I would ask, is there a motion to accept those minutes?
I so move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Rusty. Is there any discussion of those minutes? Then I shall take the roll call in regard to approving them. Miranda?
Aye.
Zahn?
Aye.
Rusty?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The minutes are approved. And now we're going on to new business. Joining Deerfield Valley CUD, the CUD. I put this in your hands, Zahn, and as I hope you've all read the proposal that Zahn is going to speak to.
Yes, thank you, Richard. So Michael and I have been talking, and there is a proposal in your packet. I don't know, did everybody see it?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So I can talk it through, but I don't know that it's necessary. The real point is that I think when we agreed as a select board a while back before the town meeting that we would kind of move along at the behest or in accordance with Wyndham Regional Commission. I see I wrote Wyndham Regional Council. That's wrong, but Wyndham Regional Commission. That made sense at the time, but a lot has changed since then. And it seems like now we would be able to get the kind of leadership and the kind of active engagement that I think we really want by joining the CUD now and being able to be part of the process as this thing is being investigated and built, rather than being a later player when it's handed to us to look at. So I think that if everyone agrees, the motion's there on the piece of paper. I don't know, Richard, if we can just move to get a second and then start if there are questions or anything.
I think that you should read the motion out loud.
Oh, okay. Let me, where did it go? Well, here it is. The motion is, on behalf of the town of Guilford, the Guilford Select Board approves joining the Deerfield Valley Communications Union District.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, Michael seconds. Is there any discussion? I would just say that I think this is great. I'm so glad that you and Michael are on the ball here and have shown great initiative. And and also there's the an additional factor of Zahn knowing personally some of the folks involved in this, and I think that could be very helpful to us. So I'm very glad that we're getting in on this in a very early stage. So I'm very.
Richard, may I just say one more thing?
Yes, please.
For us to be sure that we all understand, we want to make sure that in case there are questions of us individually, we want to be certain that everyone understands that this is not making a commitment on the behalf of the town for any kind of taxes or any kind of revenues. It can't do that. So we're not, this whole project has to move forward apart from tax revenues. So we're not binding the town in any way, especially at this very particular moment.
Right. And we know that the select board has the authority to make a motion and accept like this, because we've checked on that.
And I know that probably for each of us, a number of people have spoken to us about how overtaxed their internet capacity is and what kind of deficits there are. And I know that people who were watching this meeting have experienced that.
Is there any further discussion? Then I shall take the roll. Veranda, Porch.
Aye.
Zahn Eastis.
Aye.
Rusty Marine. Michael Becker. Michael?
Aye.
Richard Wazansky, aye. The motion carries unanimously. Yippee! That's what I say. I think that that this could be very promising. And if you've read the feasibility study, south, but I can hear. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is to select a representative to the CUD and an alternative. Does someone want to make a motion to select a representative?
I'd like to nominate, can we do, sorry about the echo, I don't understand about that. Can we nominate a representative and an alternative at the same time? Or just
yes. No, let's do it in one motion.
Okay, I'd like to nominate Zahn and Michael as the rep and the alternative, and either one of them as rep and alternative, they could choose as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
I
you
think
should
that we
be
need to-
clear in your motion, please.
Yeah, I think so. And-
Okay, I nominate Zahn to be the representative and Michael to be the
do I have a second for that motion?
I will second.
Thank you, Michael. Is there any further discussion? Okay, are you saying something, Zahn? You're muted.
Yes, I'd like to try. Thank you. Sorry. There is an actual form that I sent, I think, to Richard. I don't know if you have I don't know if I sent it to Peter or not. We have to actually complete this form once we get this done. That just can be forwarded then to the CUD. I'll let them know that we have to have evidence from our minutes and then this other document that will place our representative and alternative so they have information. And then we're essentially in, as far as I understand.
If you send that to me, I'll take care of that, Zahn.
Okay.
You
So,
got the document?
I'm sorry, what?
You don't have the document?
I'm sorry, I did not receive it.
Okay, I'm not even sure if I sent it to you. Okay.
Okay,
I'll send it along.
thank
okay,
you.
so the paperwork will be completed, and we voted, and that motion has carried unanimously. Oh, we didn't vote yet?
You did not vote yet.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Veranda Porch, on the motion for the representative and alternative, what say you? You're muted. You're muted, Veranda.
Okay, am I not now?
Yes, you are. What say you? That's all you need to say. Aye. Thank you. Zahn,
Aye.
Rusty,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Richard, aye. So the motion is carried unanimous. Congratulations to our select board. I think that we've really done something super here. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the next item on our agenda is the grand list extension. Peter, do you want to speak to that, please?
Yes, I would be happy to. So I shared a document with all the select board members prior to the meeting. Lisa received a letter from the director of the Property Valuation and Review Division within the Department of Taxes, informing us that the state has offered an extension on the submission of the grand list to all towns across the state. There is really nothing for us to do. We already have this extension. It's just that the select board needs to have a motion acknowledging that we have received this extension, and then have the select board chair sign this document that I shared with you.
And
Lisa,
what's the date? What's the date? of the
we need to
extension?
return this to the on or before the 24th of June.
And when is the extension till then?
The extension, good question, Richard. So the extension is until the 15th of September. There's two different deadlines. One is the 15th of August and the second is the 15th of September. Lisa did inform me that it is her goal and intention to have the grand list submitted to the state by the original deadline, which is the end of June. But she basically wants the select board to approve this just in case there are any unique circumstances that arise due to COVID-19.
Okay, so do we put in the motion August 15th or September 15th?
You don't even need to put in a date. You just, in the motion, someone can move to accept the deadline extension by the Department of Property Valuation and Review.
Okay, do I have a motion to do that? I'll do that. I motion that we do that.
Okay?
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Veranda. Is there any discussion? Okay, I shall take the roll. Zahn?
Aye.
Rusty?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Veranda?
Aye.
Richard? Aye. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. On old business, oh yes, this is old business, the dog issues. Not the ordinance, but the dog issues. Peter and I had a conversation earlier this afternoon or later this afternoon, and I asked Peter just to see if he could clarify for me and us where we are with the various complaints that we've had about dogs. I know that one of them is the letter that Miranda and Michael and Peter worked on, and we want to get that out to our correspondent, to that complainer, right?
Yep. So I did look through the previous information, and the short version is more or less everything has been followed up. The one outstanding thing was to send this letter to the dog owner from Lee Road from the incident involving the dog bite several weeks back. And then, as Richard and I discussed this afternoon, we were going to follow up with the one of the complainants from that situation with whom we've had previous conversation, just to let that individual know that a letter has been sent to the dog owner, and that the select board has followed up with the limited action that can be taken at this time.
Mm-hmm. But we do express a warning in that letter.
That is correct. So this is a letter that Miranda and I drafted, and then several of you gave additional input on. And it was my understanding, since various people had given input, just that we wanted general approval from the select board to send this to the dog owner.
And does anybody disapprove of that letter?
No.
No. Okay.
I'm really glad that you restored the paragraph about settling it amicably, because I think it's really important for everybody, the complainers and the dog owner, to try to be neighborly if they can.
Yep. So I think that's a palliative in that letter.
I guess it sounds like this conversation that been on the Lee Road incident, which I realize is the oldest and most serious one, but we've had other complaints. And is there any action needed on those other complaints?
The other complaints were situation, as I shared at the last select board meeting. The other complaints were not actually events that occurred. Certain people had been warned by specific dog owners that their dog was aggressive towards other animals, and were warned to avoid the dog, which is somewhat out of in violation of this, in a roundabout way, of the current ordinance. So I did respond to them, both people. One situation, the neighbors worked it out, and the owner of the dog did install a dog fence, and it has been working. And the complainant did respond to me that she felt that the situation was resolved amicably, so that's positive. And then the other people that I did hear from made it clear that they have not had an incident, but they are concerned as they see the dog roaming about quite regularly.
Can I suggest that, Peter, that you establish a dog complaint file?
I already have one, Richard.
Okay, good. And is that accessible by the select board, or is that in your files?
That is accessible only on the server here in the town office, which if select board wishes to see it, you could come in and do so. The other option would be, I suppose I could create a folder on the Google Drive and put that information in there and share that with all of the select board members if you wish me to do that.
I don't need that, but I'm glad to hear that there's a file being kept.
Yep, there was a procedure in place prior to my employment with the town, and I have been following along with that previous.
Okay, and so does that file have, so if you have a letter, let's say from one of our citizens about a dog, does the file have where the status is in regard to that communication?
Not specifically, no. It has communications either from complainants or to people who are the dog owners of those situations.
So you might, I would suggest that you have an open and closed case file
Okay.
so that we know what's open and we know what's closed. I'm just concerned that we are, as a select board, when we get a complaint, that we are very communicative and responsive to the citizens of our town, because obviously the dog issues are very important to some people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for the suggestion. Good idea.
Yeah. Okay, now the dog ordinance, which is the next item, you all had the revised dog ordinance, which you should have seen was filled in. Michael and I spent quite a bit of time, and Peter too, in creating a revised dog ordinance. The main feature of the revision, I would say, was the penalties, which we wanted, Michael and I both agreed should be stricter. So we tried to do that, and there were no penalties for the so-called vicious dog. There were penalties for the potentially vicious dog, but there were no penalties for the vicious dog, and we added those. And I think that in your copy of the revision, you should see that. And that, to me, that's what the major change was in the document. Michael, do you want to add to that? Michael?
Yeah, I'm thinking. That was a pretty good summary, I thought.
You're muted, Veranda. Can you unmute?
Okay. Yes. It's a little, and yes.
But you look marvelous.
Why, thank you. I dressed up. I'm looking at the penalties and the waiver of penalties, and I don't really understand the waiver of penalties part.
Do you want to speak to that, Peter?
I was just going to do so. So the way that VLCT put their draft document together, they gave Vermont towns the ability to implement a waiver fee. And the waiver fee is such that if a dog owner openly admits that there was an incident, that instead of pursuing legal action, which is what would have to happen in order for the fines to be implemented, that we could implement a waiver fee, which would be a reduction in the original fine by the owner admitting to the incident, and then it would not go through the Vermont judicial system.
So there's no contest, basically.
Correct.
Yeah. Does that explain it to you, Veranda? We took the waiver fee out. We took the waiver fee out of the vicious dog. However, there's no waivers for a vicious dog. Isn't that right, Peter, as I recall?
That is correct, Richard. Because we felt in the discussion that Richard shared with me from him and Michael, is the feeling was that if there is a vicious dog incident, that the town wants to make it clear that that is unacceptable, and so that those fines would be pursued in a legal manner.
And a vicious dog incident means that the dog has bit somebody and there's medical involvement.
Yeah, medical care is needed.
Yeah, Rusty, did you want to add something?
Yeah, you sort of answered it. I just wanted to know what the definition of vicious was.
Yeah.
You answered it for me.
So that's the difference.
Do we now have the ability to have a hearing after the first vicious incident if somebody requires medical attention? Is that one of
I thought that's the way that it reads, yes.
That's kind of one of the fundamental changes that, we didn't really have the ability to do that.
Yes, that's
before,
under, Michael,
right?
that is under Section 9.
Yeah. Section 9.
Which I feel better about. I mean, that, serious incident on Lee Road,
Section 9 outlines the sequence of the investigation.
And so now it is at the discretion of the select board to hold that hearing at any point. It is no longer after a third incident. It can now happen. So if the select board deems a vicious dog incident one time is sufficient to hold a hearing, then we have a hearing. And I think that's a good change.
Yes, it is.
I agree.
I think so.
I feel better about that.
Further discussion?
I just would like to add, just so the select board is aware, that per state statute, that should you adopt this new ordinance this evening, that it will not become effective for 60 days to enable residents opportunity to petition against it if they so wish. I don't suspect that will happen, but it is a legal requirement by the state.
So then is there a legal requirement that we have to put this out in a public way, let people know that action was taken tonight, and sort of give a 60-day, grace period for people to respond?
Excellent questions on it. And the answer to that is yes. I have to make a posting on the town website with a full draft, or not draft, but a full copy of the new ordinance. And I also have to post it in our newspaper of record. Thankfully, the state several years ago changed the statute. The reason being is previously we had to publish the entirety of the new ordinance in the newspaper, and they now allow us to reference the new ordinance and tell people where they can find it so they can review it. Otherwise, we would have had to publish 8 pages in the newspaper, which would have been quite costly.
Do you think it would be useful to put a summary of the changes in the new ordinance on Front Porch Forum so that it would be widely disseminated? Because I'm sure that more people read Front Porch Forum than go to the town website.
I would make an alternate suggestion that you could put on Front Porch Forum that there has been a revision of the dog ordinance. I think if you how to summarize it and what to summarize is a little bit. I wouldn't be in favor of that myself.
I would say that's at the discretion of the select board to directly answer your question. So the rest, all of you would need to decide if that was something you wanted me to do. What I previously stated are the legal requirements of what I need to do.
It would be good to put a simple statement on a Front Porch Forum with a link or something, or some way in which people can go and see it, but that we wouldn't spend time on Front Porch Forum trying to explain to people what was going on.
That's what I was getting at.
And also importantly, wherever it is on the, it appears on our website, it needs to have contact information for select board members or you, Peter, so that people with questions can have ready access to.
Yep. That's part of the legal requirement. Is there has to be contact information, minimum of telephone number or mailing address or email for a select board representative. We don't need to put all of your information up there, but I will certainly have my name and contact information on there. Yeah,
I would like you to be the contact, Peter.
I'm going to just ask if there's any support for the idea of posting all highway signs, new dog ordinance. I think these venues that we're talking about are going to reach.
I can't understand what you're saying.
Affected by, I'm sorry, is my connection bad?
Ours just gone haywire.
No, you sound very clear.
So,
can you hear me?
Yes.
I think
keep it short, but I just think we should post it on the programmable highway sign just to reach as many people as possible that don't use Front Porch Forum or the newspaper or the town website. And, people drive their cars by these signs. That's universal.
I'm not sure I like that idea. What's the rest of the select board feel?
I don't think the newspaper is really a medium that, I subscribe to the Reformer, but, I think it's a bit of a dinosaur at this point.
I'm just concerned about the use of that sign, and are we going to use that sign for everything that the select board, every action the select board takes? I don't think that's the purpose of the sign. But I'm happy to defer to.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Richard. I'm concerned about like the safety of kids, and I really want to get the message out. And I don't want to abuse those signs either, and put out every little message that isn't necessary. But I don't know. I feel pretty strongly about trying to really put the word out that if you have a dog that's out of control, want to do whatever we can.
Well, let me take a consensus. I say no to that. And what do others say?
I don't care for the idea of putting a notice on that sign. And further, I think people are an issue of dogs is very emotionally volatile.
Yes,
Both
that's part of
the
it.
dog owners who think Fido is misunderstood, and people who don't want anybody in their family to get bitten. And so being fair and clear and low key, I think, is important.
I agree with that. Zahn, do you have an opinion?
I agree. I agree with what you both said. Sorry, Michael. I think that it's just important that we. It's also important to me that we not sort of give the community the sense that we're trying every possible way we can to connect to you, and we're probably missing somehow. So please tell us how we can try harder. I think that we need to help the community understand that there are 2 or 3 ways that we speak to the community, and it's up to the community to sort of figure that part out as best they can.
Yeah, thank you. Rusty, do you have an opinion?
I agree. You can't put every revision or everything we do for the select board on that sign, so I agree with you.
Sorry, Michael.
That's okay. Fair enough.
Good try.
Very nicely put. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I would add
I
that
need a motion to accept the revised dog ordinance.
I just briefly want to just add one thing is that all legal notices and other forms of notices similar to that are also all published on the Brattleboro Reformer website, which anyone can access those notices without having to pay for a subscription.
Oh, I see.
So thank you, Peter. I'm looking for a motion to.
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michael. Is there any further discussion? Veranda?
Aye.
Zahn?
Aye.
Rusty?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Richard? Aye. The motion carries. Thank you very much. I think we've made a great deal of progress in that revision. And that's a
Yes,
good thing.
thank you. I want to just say thank you for all that good work. It was very much easier to read this and kind of think about it in the fashion that it came this time. So I appreciate that very much.
You're very good. Okay, now Constable and Dog Officer Peter, would you like to speak to that issue?
Yes. So at the first meeting after town meeting, you folks did appoint a young man who's recently moved to Guilford as the constable. There was some discussion with him about him taking the role of dog officer at that same time. He was rather reluctant to do so. One of the things with that is he had family experience related to that, as well as it would be best if that individual took some training about being a dog officer. And with the surge of COVID-19, obviously all those types of trainings went out the window, at least temporarily. The additional thing, as I had shared previously with Richard, one of the things that the select board at that time felt was important was doing a background check on that individual, which we need to follow up with our insurance company about additional information related to that, or I need to follow up on that. So really, we don't have a dog officer at the moment because that individual really was uncertain about taking on that role. So that's kind of where the situation is.
So we need a dog officer.
We do need a dog officer. And just to also, sorry to interrupt, Richard, just to briefly add, this is a problem throughout the entire state of Vermont. This is not unique to Guilford. Many towns across the state have this issue where they struggle to fill this role. In other states, this is commonly filled at the county level, but because we don't have county government, we don't have that as an option.
Is there any select board member who would also like to be the dog officer?
No.
Just thought I'd ask.
Why don't we form a communications dog district? And a bunch of towns together to get one dog officer.
Well, you joke about that, but that's actually been a discussion amongst, at least about a year and a half ago. That was actually a discussion amongst several of the town administrators and town managers within the Windham County region to look at the potential of doing that. And if each town contributed a small amount of money, say several $1,000s, and that individual, had 10 different towns that they worked for, that person could potentially have part-time to a full-time job depending on the needs of each community.
Sure.
But
Can I suggest that we have that advertised again on the Front Porch Forum and on our website, that we're looking for a dog officer?
Sure. Would you like me to put an advertisement in the newspaper?
Sure.
Okay, I will do so.
Okay, on to the next.
I would just say if we get no response, well, no, let's wait and see if we get responses, because I'm in favor of the idea of towns and, this alternative sounds good.
So, okay, maybe
See how it goes.
Before we move on, does it make sense to reach out to the select boards of adjacent towns and ask them if they want to pursue this actively?
But I think that's good. Yeah, that's kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Peter, can you do that? I mean,
Of course, that's what my job
I would
is
say
for.
towns in our vicinity,
Yes, well, the adjacent towns.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, on to the next item on the agenda, which is potential budget shortfall scenarios. This is where we were asking you to look at the fiscal budget that will go in effect on July 1st, and if you could identify hypothetically where you thought cuts could be made. Does anybody have any suggestions in that regard besides me?
Richard, we had the finance committee meeting today.
Yeah.
They came up with some ideas, some recommendations. They wanted to know if the select board would report out measures that have been enacted or have been contemplated to reduce the budget for this year. They recommended that we look over the overtime policy and how we do overtime. And they wanted to know what we're doing about, are you and going to be doing about the highway staffing levels and like part-time versus full-time work, analysis of aberrations, if any, between terms of personnel policy and employee practices that have financial applications.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I don't know if we can solve any of that ourselves tonight, but the Finance Advisory Committee is going to look into those items. That
they would like to know what we're doing about that. They want us to tell them so they can work on it themselves.
Uh-huh.
Rusty, could you please say what the second thing on your list was?
There's overtime and the overtime policy. Is that the one you were talking about?
No, the next one.
Okay, the highway staffing.
Thank you.
They were wondering, I guess we have, 5 people working now?
Yes. So I just want to point out that this, while in some ways it does relate to the budget shortfall scenarios, it is somewhat of a distinctly separate topic that was not previously warned on this, as well as Sheila and I are working, or will be working on drafting a memo to the select board touching on the topics a little bit more clearly and what questions the Finance Advisory Committee has on the topics that Rusty elucidated moments ago.
Great.
So I would say, Don, were you wanting to say something?
No, except that I noticed that these issues are strike me as personnel issues, and none of the other topics on the sheet that we were given. And we talked about the idea of separating personnel from everything else. So it sounds like we're walking into it now here, potentially.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the money is, really. You think about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, and there are, so, you know, when I was looking at the budget, I one would hope that personnel cuts would be the last kinds of cuts that an organization has to make, because we're talking about human capital and human resources. But I mean, I looked at the overtime, staff travel, for instance, and other aspects. The potential raises that we were giving for the next fiscal year are also something that we need to look at. So I don't know how does the select board want to handle it. I don't think that we are going to sit down and study these things tonight and make decisions about them. But shall we organize ourselves in a way? Shall we wait for Peter and Sheila to give us those questions in an articulated form, and then form a study committee that will be looking thoroughly into the budget and answers to those questions?
I think personally, I think that's a wise decision, Richard. And I also think, as Zahn wisely noted, that this is kind of a middle area that partially falls into personnel situation, and we have to be cautious how we discuss that publicly, as well as it's also a financial situation. But because those topics that Rusty spoke on relate to personnel, we have to be careful how that's discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Has anybody talked to Danny about possible cuts on the highway crew?
I haven't.
No, I have not.
And the fifth person is not a permanent, right? That's just a supplemental addition.
A grant.
That's
Yes.
Alan that we're talking about, right?
Yes. So you folks previously informally agreed that it was okay for him to work on the grant project that needed to be finished on Carpenter Hill Road, because his wages for that work will be reimbursed as part of the grant. But you did not really authorize any additional work by him at this time due to COVID-19. And then I believe that Danny and Richard were meant to have a follow-up conversation about that, and I don't know if that occurred.
No, it did not occur. So one thought I have is that I think that this should be, as we do with the budget, we have special meetings of the select board. And it seems to me that that this requires a special meeting. I wish we could sit down together in person and go over these things, but at the present time we can't. But I think my thinking just spontaneously is that we wait for Sheila and Peter, and if Rusty's adding to that the articulation of what the Finance Advisory Committee is suggesting that we look at, and we have that document, and we call us a one or two, or if it's more, special meetings to just talk about where we might make cuts in the budget, hypothetically, because this is all hypothetical, because it all depends on what the tax revenue is going to produce. And we don't know for sure that we're going to have diminished tax revenues this year. It's a possibility, but we want to be ready for the possibility. So that's my suggestion, and I'm wondering what the select board thinks about that. One, to have this note from Peter and Sheila, and then to use that as a kind of study guide to call several, one or more special meetings to go over the budget. Just as we created the budget, now we have to review the budget.
I thank you, Richard. I think I love the idea. It's more meetings, but I love the idea of being able to talk this through in a careful way. And consider things. The other piece that will help me make decisions is guidance from, I don't know whom, VLCT perhaps, about what level of cuts. I know that's been put out there. Peter did this worksheet about various levels of cuts, but are we honing into any reality here? Are other communities beginning to understand it's going to be 10%, a 40%, cut that's going to be required.
Zon, that's really the big unknown that no one has an
Yeah.
answer to. And yes, VLCT is working hard, but they have unfortunately no concrete advice at the moment. And they are working very heavily with our state legislature and with the governor to try and figure out some form of financial assistance for communities, since we really don't know what's going to happen. And some towns are making immediate cuts effective now. Some towns are making cuts effective July 1st with the new fiscal year, even though they don't really know what's going to happen because taxes aren't collected till October.
Well, and so are there examples of, or any talk anywhere about the notions of any softness around the dates for taxes being paid or fines? Or is everyone going to get, who can't pay because of COVID, are they going to get slapped with an interest payment that's binding? Isn't there? I hope there's some talk at the state level about that.
So the interest level for local, the interest payment for local taxes is up to, if I remember correctly from what Penny told me, that the interest payment only is up to the select board as to whether or not the select board wishes to waive the interest payment on delinquent taxes. As our delinquent tax collector, I would personally prefer to defer to her and have, whether she writes a memo to the select board or how she communicates or joins a select board meeting. She's the expert in this topic, and I think she would be able to better speak to it.
There is some state guidance. I sent it to Penny as the treasurer, and I'll send it to all of us. It came out from VLCT about where the state at the present time is thinking about interest rates and so forth on delinquent taxes. So I will, I'll send that out tomorrow morning. I found it very informative, and so much so that I thought that Penny should be looking at it.
Right.
One thing that we could do is, I think maybe that could guide us, is that Peter did do that what was it, 4 percentages?
Yeah.
Yep.
Was 4 percentages, and maybe we could use that as a guide and look at the budget and see and hypothetically come out with whether we're at 15%. Okay, then we're going to go here and there to make that 15%, and then to the next one was 25%, and so for each of those percentages, we could identify in the budget where the cuts would come from and add them up. I think that might be a very practicable way of moving.
Yeah, like if we had to cut 10%, these are the places we would go for that. If we need to go 20, these are the places so we could prioritize our cuts.
Right.
Is that what you're saying? Something like that?
So we won't know the cuts until October, correct?
Right, but
Or
we would
the
be doing
percentages
this.
we lost.
Yeah, that's correct. But we could start making decisions about where we're going to turn first when we have to make those cuts.
Yeah.
And something that's very interesting is the unknown of how people are going to be moving to work. I'm thinking about the highway budget and wear and tear on our roads and the need to get out to a job, school, or other forms of work first thing in the morning. And I wonder whether there's going to be a difference in the way that our constituents, our people, are going to be living, which might affect highway use, road.
Yeah. So if I could summarize where I think we've got to here is that Peter and Sheila are meeting to come up with a series of questions, framing questions from the Finance Advisory Committee to the Select Board. The Select Board will take those questions and study them, and then we will have at least one special meeting, it probably is going to be two, to come up with a hypothetical scenario of where we would make those cuts using the 4 percentages that Peter established that might possibly happen with the impact of COVID to our budget because of lost revenues. Does that sound like where we've been?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So, Peter, we'll look forward to getting that kind of guiding document from you and Sheila.
Yes, indeed.
And perhaps
I would also, if you haven't already done so, what I did was I went to the budget and looked at each line item and said, if it's necessary, we could cut there. And so I have a list in my notebook of where I think possible cuts could be made. And I urge you all to do that too, which will keep you informed. The budget is on our Google Docs, is in the Google Docs.
Okay.
Okay, did anybody want to further say something? Okay, then on to Peter's update.
Richard, I was just going to offer that perhaps a couple of us could safely meet at social distance and have individual, twosome study groups to just go through, let's say, your list and my list and try to come to our group meeting with fewer variables.
Yes, I would be happy to do that. I have a big lawn, so if people would like to do that, we can meet on my lawn and compare lists.
Remember,
I'll put out an invitation.
just remember, if more than two
That
of
sounds
you,
nice.
Oh, wait a minute, though. But we have to be careful of the meeting laws.
open meeting law, yeah. So if more than two of you meet at Richard's house, it has to be a meeting that is open to the public.
Oh, well, maybe just 2 of us. I'll meet with you at my house veranda.
Okay.
Okay?
And maybe,
and I'm happy to go to anybody's house who invites me.
Likewise.
But you're muted, Zon. Zon, you're muted.
Maybe Richard, Veranda should meet with Richard, then somebody should meet with Veranda, then somebody should meet with that person. Just chainmail it and then reduce the list that way.
Yeah, right.
Be careful, because that has been viewed as a violation of open meeting law previously in other towns.
Oy vey.
Oh, you mean the chain?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, on to Peter, your update on COVID-19.
Yep, I'll try and make this brief as I have been doing. So, sounds like we're getting feedback from somebody, possibly Michael. Thank you. So as everyone now knows, just over a week ago, the governor extended his stay home, stay safe order until the 15th of June. On a positive note, Vermont currently no longer has anyone in the ICU with a case of COVID-19. And at the moment, Vermont has the lowest total case numbers in the country. So it's very positive for us, particularly in light of the fact that several of our neighboring states are seeing increases in their caseloads. Governor Scott has also been pushing for a minimum of 1,000 new tests per day. And for the past several days, the state has been exceeding 1,000 tests per day. And with this increased level of testing, residents of Vermont that are symptom-free can go and get tested. Obviously, you have to go through your primary care provider, but you can get tested. Last week, Governor Scott also allowed the opening of parks, beaches, and other similar outdoor type recreation areas as long as people follow social distancing guidelines. There's also some very limited reopening of municipal buildings with quite a number of caveats, which I shared with the Selectboard and town staff. Towns are also permitted to pass emergency measures which require the use of face masks in all buildings and businesses in town. Burlington and Brattleboro have already passed such emergency measures, and many other towns are in the process of passing similar regulations. And last but not least, on one of my EMD calls conference calls last week, Senator Leahy joined us, and he spoke briefly about work that he has been doing in the Senate to craft a financial care package, as he worded it, to assist municipalities and counties across the United States. And so it has passed one of the houses in the legislature and is currently before the Senate, in which there are some heated discussions happening. But he's very proud of the work that's been done on that, and it's, as he noted, it's been across the aisle, and he's hoping that there are enough people that can support it to help municipalities across the country work through this pandemic at a financial level.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any comments or questions for Peter? It was a good summary. Okay, on to the warrants.
Okay, so I move that we pay the following warrants. Payroll week 5/17/20 for $6,647.63. Payroll week 5/24/20 for $6,131.42. Expense warrant 2022 for the sum of $19,790.77, and expense warrant FW22 for the sum of $131.50, for a total of $32,701.32. The greatest expenses being, once again, gravel and insurance.
Do I have a second? Zahn seconds that. Is there any discussion? I'll take the roll then. Veranda?
Aye.
Aye.
Zahn? Rusty?
Aye.
Aye.
Michael? Richard? Aye. So the warrants will be paid. Thank you very much. Any communications this week, Peter?
None. Oh, sorry, none.
Okay. Actions taken.
Actions.
Do you want to handle that?
Yep, actions taken during this meeting was the Select Board approved joining the Deerfield Valley Communications Union District. The Select Board appointed Zahn as the CUD representative and Michael as the alternative. The Select Board approved the deadline extension on the grand list. The Select Board adopted the amended dog ordinance, and actions to be taken is Peter to advertise the role of dog officer on various sources, the website, etc., and Peter to contact adjacent communities about the possibility of a joint dog officer role across communities.
Good. I'd like to insert different actions taken for every one of our meetings, which is to look at the minutes of the previous meeting and what those actions were that we had said should be taken, to see whether those actions have been taken.
And Richard, that's already on this list, and I have them in front of me.
Okay, so I have Peter to speak with Dan about Alan's extra hours.
Which I did, and that's why Dan was going to speak with Richard about that topic, as you are his direct supervisor.
Right. And then the second one is Peter to draft a letter of support for BTCC and share it with Richard prior to sending it.
And that was also done.
Okay, Michael, Richard, and Peter to review final details of amended dog ordinance.
Also done.
Yep. Peter to share a draft letter to dog owner with Select Board.
Also done.
RFP for Tater Lane Covert Project.
Also done.
And Richard to discuss potential budget cuts with Penny, which I did do.
And all those items are on
One question. Sorry, go ahead.
So I just wanted you to clarify what I was doing there, because I was.
My question? Sorry. The joining the CUD form for that, Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Form we need to process through, I think, and submit.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's
sure. Thank you, Michael. So,
Can we add that as an action item?
yes,
Put
I'm
in the
doing
list.
so.
Yes.
So,
Peter, we need to forward a copy of our minutes
Yes.
to the CUD and fill out this other form.
Yep.
Those two things.
Okay, I just wanted to go back where I was at when I was giving that list. Those were the actions that we wanted to be taken in our previous meeting, and I'm just wanting to go over those at every meeting so that we know so we can check them off.
Which we have been doing, Richard. I've been reading out those out at the end of each meeting.
Okay, good, excellent. So now I think our next is, if I'm not mistaken, is there a motion to adjourn? Rusty, thank you. Do I have a second?
Aye.
I have Michael as a second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
You might want to take a vote, Richard.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Yeah. All those in favor, Veranda?
Aye.
Zahn?
Aye.
Rusty? And Michael?
Aye.
And Richard? Aye. So that we move that unanimously. Thank you very much. We're so adjourned.
Have a good
Yes,
evening.
thank you, Peter.
All right. Bye-bye.